It's in our nature to protect the ones we love, to stand up to any danger, to be strong and courageous, to always be prepared, to keep our family safe, to be the first line of defense. We are born to protect.
What's up and welcome to the channel. My name is Headshot and thank you for joining us for the basics of gun safety. And today I'm going to talk about those basics, why they're so important, and I'm going to show you a variety of different guns here and how to work the safety on them and to make sure that you are not only enjoying your time at the range and as a brand new gun owner or whatever the case may be, but that you always keep these things in the back of your head, because you got to remember, and I say this all the time to my son, to Mrs. Headshot, I'm not like a safety Nazi or whatever, you know, lack of better terms there. I'm not like that all of the time, but I do keep a constant reminder to these guys that we have to be super safe, because one mistake in the world of firearms can basically, it could ruin your life. It could change everything in your life. So these things are designed to be fun. It's designed to save your life. And my goal is to never be on the receiving end of a negligent or an accidental discharge or whatever you want to call it. We don't want to have those, okay? We want to be super safe and be cognizant of what's going on whenever we're handling firearms. So hopefully I can help some of you out there and help you to have more fun. Obviously, you want to have fun while you're doing this, but also to be safe at the same time. So we're going to get the camera pointed on a couple of different options. I'm going to talk about those gun safety basics, and then I'm going to show you how the safeties work and how to use them on various firearms. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the very first rule of gun safety is to treat every gun like it's loaded. Remember that anybody that's ever been accidentally shot or accidentally shot themselves, or God forbid a loved one, thought the gun was unloaded. So you're going to treat every gun like it's loaded, no matter if you're in a gun store, if you're at the range, somebody hands you a firearm, they could have just checked it 100 times. The first thing you do, because you're going to treat it like it's loaded, is you're going to check the chamber, okay? AR-15 style rifles, really simple. You basically have a charging handle back here, all right? And you're going to visually inspect, dropping the mag out, and you're going to visually inspect the chamber right here. And basically you want to make sure and to ensure that there is no round in that chamber. Now, once you get more used to this, obviously, it becomes a little less noticeable, I guess you could say, but you just want to drop that mag out and check that chamber. And we're just trying to make sure that there is nothing in the chamber. Now, while I'm doing this, I'm not going to have the muzzle in, which comes to our second point. Always point the muzzle in a safe direction. So even if I'm in a gun store and the guy behind the counter says, oh, no, it's all right, the gun's unloaded, you're going to point that gun down towards the ground because that's the most natural and easiest way to do it, at least, you know, definitely with an AR. With a lot of these guns it is. So I'm going to point that gun down towards the ground, and I'm going to make sure that that thing is physically unloaded and there's no bullets in the magazine, of course, before I put the magazine back in the gun and do my thing with it, okay? So we're going to drop the mag. We're going to make sure that that gun is unloaded, okay? Here is a KP9. This is like an AK style gun here, okay? So I'm going to visually inspect the chamber. There's no bullet in there, okay? I can drop that if I want to add the safety or move the safety up on this gun. So this one is designed where it basically will lock the bolt out, so you cannot get that bolt back whenever you move the safety up. Move the safety down. Now I can move that bolt back. So whenever you're at the range, you're going to keep your finger off of the trigger until you're ready to fire. Now, a lot of times in our videos, you will see me actually test the trigger out, so I can kind of show you what that looks like and things like that. But I always have it pointed, obviously, away from Mrs. Headshot, pointed away from the camera where she is behind right now, and I have it pointed in a safe direction all the time. And I visually check that chamber each and every time before I pull that trigger and make sure But this is kind of how an AK style safety works. Let me show you a different one here. Now, one thing you want to make sure, back to the AR here really quick, is you have safe and fire, okay? So when it's on safe, obviously the trigger cannot be pulled. I've already checked and visually checked that this gun is not loaded. All right, it's on safe right now. The trigger cannot be pulled, but you don't ever want to just rely on that safety. If your finger is not on the trigger, all right, chances are it's not going to fire. It's not going to fire, okay? But one thing you do want to make sure of, if you go to load a firearm, and the reason that they say, you know, always keep the gun in a safe direction, even if you're loading and the safety's on, it's just good habit. Because if one time you have it in the fire position and you actually go to load the firearm and God forbid the firing pin hangs or something like that and there's a round in the chamber, theoretically the gun could go off, okay? So the biggest thing to keep in mind is anytime you're doing anything with a firearm, just keep it pointed in a safe direction. Keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire, and know what's, know where your target is and know what's beyond your target as well. You just don't want to randomly start firing shots just because you think it's safe. So, obviously be on a designated shooting range whenever you are actually shooting and firing your gun, to make sure it's as safe as possible, having berms and things like that. The place we used to shoot a long time ago, actually we were shooting downhill, so any rounds that didn't hit the target, they actually just went straight into the water that was down the hill, and there was no houses not even close in our vicinity, so we knew we were being safe whenever we went to that particular range. But shooting at a range with berms is definitely ideal and the way you want to go. So here is a Beretta M9A3. All right, so first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to drop the magazine. I'm going to visually check and make sure this gun is clear. This one does not have a traditional safety. So this right here is actually a decocker. So what that does is that safely drops that hammer onto the back of the firing pin without making the round go off, okay? But even when I do that, right, let's say I just loaded this mag completely, right? I just loaded a round into the chamber. I'm not, at this point, even though I know by doing this, it safely drops the hammer, I'm not going to point it and miss a headshot because I know it safely drops the hammer. I'm going to point it down at the ground. I'm going to drop that hammer safely. But that's your safety on this gun. So the safety on this gun is knowing that that first trigger pull is really heavy. All right, it takes a lot of trigger and pressure to get that first round to go off. The subsequent shots after that are going to be really light and really nice. But that first round, all right, that first round, it's going to take a lot of trigger press to get that gun to go off. So that's saying, hey, I know I'm going to fire that gun because I am making a very conscious decision to pull that trigger all the way back. Now, let's say this gun was a single action only. At that point, some of these guns actually do have safeties that you can engage, which means you would have to disengage the safety when it were to go back off, basically. Okay, so something like this old school Walther, right? So if I were to chamber this gun, right, if I were to chamber this gun, the safety's now back, I could actually put this gun on safe like that, which would, basically render it useless until I move it back up to the fire position. But still, it's going to be a long double action pull that very first shot. So it acts like a safety because it takes so much trigger force to actually pull that first shot, and then the rest of your shots are in single action. So it is somewhat of a safety already built into it. Plus there's hammer blocks and things like that in place in case the gun were to be dropped, so it wouldn't accidentally fire and things like that. So this is a striker fire gun. So again, whenever I do it, I actually drop the mag, visually make sure that we're clear and we're good to go. This gun, you will notice, does not actually have any external safety. It doesn't have a hammer block because it's a striker. So on the inside of this gun, there's a spring with a striker, and it has a lot of force, and whenever you pull the trigger, basically that trigger finishes the action of the striker, and the striker goes forward whenever you pull and finish that cycle. What keeps this safe, even with a loaded chamber, is the fact that it has a trigger safety in the middle. So unless that trigger safety is engaged, the striker can't release on that chamber or on that bullet. Okay, so it's physically impossible for that striker to ever go forward unless you finish the action with your trigger. Here's that trigger safety right here. So again, until you finish the action and allow that striker to be released, this gun can never fire itself. All right, so that trigger safety is actually tied to a mechanism on the inside, which then allows that trigger safety, or that spring, and that striker assembly to shoot forward and hit the back of the primer, allowing the bullet, or allowing the gun to be fired at that point. So there's internal safeties on striker fire guns that keeps it from firing, even if it's dropped, because again, you have a trigger safety right there. So you have to make the conscious effort to actually pull the trigger to allow the gun to fire. So there's some pretty sophisticated things on a gun like this where most people say, oh, there's no safety, it's not safe. Actually, it's super safe. All right, so here is a modern rifle. So I just picked up this gun. I want to make sure it's safe. I'm going to drop the mag, visually make sure there's no round in the chamber. It has a safety that's very similar to any AR style rifle, one like I showed you in the very beginning there. So safe and then fire. So on safe, obviously I can't pull the trigger. On fire, you know, I got it pointed in a safe direction, and I'm actually going to fire that gun just like that. So that rifle works just like a traditional AR-15 or something like that. Let's say you have an old style Mauser bolt action rifle. All right, these have safeties as well. It actually has a 3 position, so if it's all the way over to the left, that's actually going to allow you to fire. If it's in the middle like that, it's going to allow you to work the bolt, but you can't actually pull the trigger. And then if I move it all the way over to the right, the trigger's locked out and the bolt is actually physically locked out. So even the older guns, they knew that their guys needed safeties, so they incorporated them, and there's many different designs and ways they incorporated those safeties, from cross bolt styles like old hunting rifles and even modern hunting rifles, where you have a little button right here that you can press, or whatever the case may be. Mauser has a little bit different design, but it still works the same kind of way there. So there are a lot of modern guns. I actually don't have one up here to show you, but there are a lot of modern guns that have external safeties, and I'll just kind of use this to demonstrate my point. But Smith & Wesson shields and other firearms, there's a lot of those modern polymer guns that are getting away from safeties. Very rarely, or if at all, are you going to find a rifle without a safety. But a lot of the handguns, especially with that striker mechanism we were talking about, have internal safeties, so they're super safe. So as long as you're being safe, the gun's safe, okay? But there are some options that still give you the additional safety, physical safety on the outside. You might be saying, well, why don't all pistols have that? Well, the thing is that with a manual safety, let's say you're carrying that gun, right? You're comfortable with it, you're carrying it, somebody attacks you. You have to remember to sweep that safety off. See, with the internal safety that we talked about earlier on this Walther, it has that built-in safety, but it's very passive, okay? So that means that I can quickly draw this gun and fire it and protect myself without having to remember any kind of external safety. With an external safety, you have to remember to sweep that thing off each and every time. And in a moment of stress, that could not be a great thing if you're not used to it. So if you have a gun with the safety, that's fine. You just want to make sure that you're constantly practicing with that and create that muscle memory. So whenever you pull that gun out, you're going to sweep that safety off each and every time. Now, most of the modern ones that I've seen on pistols actually are designed to sweep down to get the safety off. So you basically pull the gun out of the holster, sweep that safety off, and then it's ready to fire. So you just want to make sure that you are really diligent about practicing with that. Just keep in mind, there have been some examples of guns firing when they were dropped on their on the back of the striker or whatever without pulling the trigger, but that's very rare. As long as you're being safe, then you don't really have a lot to worry about. You know, it's only when people are being unsafe or they think their gun's unloaded, that's when bad things happen. So just remember that every gun is loaded. Treat every gun like it's loaded. Always keep it in a safe direction. You know, if you have a mishap, it's not like it could be the difference between a hole in your wall or a hole in the ceiling, and God forbid somebody in your household really hurt. Okay, so if you happen to have a mishap, I'd much rather have a hole in my brand new hardwood floor than I would my wife. So, or my own foot or anything like that. So keep it in a safe direction. Treat every single gun like it's loaded. Know what your target is and what's beyond it, and keep your finger off the trigger until you are ready to fire. And if you do all of those things, guns can be super safe and you can have an amazing time with them and be really, and it really is a fun thing to do. It's an awesome thing to be a part of, no matter what way you look at it. If you look at it as a pure hobby or competition, if you look at it as self-defense, if you look at it as protecting life and liberty in the United States, whatever way you actually look at guns and the Second Amendment and all this kind of stuff, you can be super safe and have a great time with these things. You just want to keep these things ingrained in your brain, no matter how far along or how new you may be, and you can have a great time with these. So hopefully I helped some of you guys out. If you have any other suggestions for new shooters, leave them down in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you in the